First item is the State of the Police Pension Report by Jeff Amrose.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's nice to be here with you today. My name is Jeff Amrose, and I work with Gabriel Ritter Smith and Company. I'm an actuary for about 25 years, and I've been serving as a consulting actuary for the West Palm Beach Police Officers Pension Plan for about 9 years. So today, I'm here to give you an update on the state of the West Palm Beach Police Officers Pension Plan. I'm going to try to keep my talk to less than 2.5 hours. I'll do my best.
That would be a good idea.
In all seriousness, I'll be taking probably 15 minutes if that's okay with everyone. But you know, the plan's in good shape, so I think we could do that in 15 minutes. Shouldn't be a problem. As some of you may remember, I was here in last June to discuss the West Palm Beach Police Pension Plan. And since that time, there's actually been further strengthening of the retirement plan. And we'll go into the reasons how that happened in a short while. It was not too long ago that the pension plan had some issues. In 2014, the required city contribution was elevated to about $10 million and was increasing each year. The funded ratio, which is one measure of the health of a retirement plan, was decreasing each year. The level of benefits was being reduced as state money was going to help fund the pension plan instead of going to the police officers' share plan account. But since 2014, as I've told you last year, there's been very significant changes in the health of the retirement plan. Today we'll discuss the two main reasons for the improved health of the retirement plan. One, the issuance of a $50 million pension obligation bond. We'll talk about how that's played out for the city. And number two, the very strong investment returns that the pension plan has seen for the last 10 years. We'll also talk about the current level of the required city contribution, where that contribution is expected to go in future years. We'll talk about the plan's funded ratio, and we'll do a very high-level comparison of the benefits provided to the police officers here to other pension plans across Florida. But before we discuss these items, let me give you a quick introduction into the pension plan benefits that are provided to the police officers here in West Palm Beach. So basically, there's three different retirement plan benefits that a West Palm Beach police officer can accrue during his or her career. These are the regular pension benefit, a drop account balance, and a share plan account balance. The regular pension benefit is calculated as the product of three numbers. It's basically the police officer's service times their pay times a benefit multiplier. So let's discuss what the benefit multiplier means. The benefit multiplier is for each year of service before October 1, 2011, they accrue 3% for each year. Between October 1, 2011 and October 1, 2017, they accrue 2.68% of pay each year. And then after October 1, 2017, they accrue 3% of pay each year. The pay used in the formula is the best 3 years of pensionable earnings. Another important plan provision for the regular benefit is the normal retirement date. When can the police officer start his or her benefit? When can they start receiving it? Well, that's defined in the Special Act, and it is the earlier of age 55 with 10 years of service, age 50 with 20 years of service, or 25 years of service. To help the city fund this benefit, the police officers themselves contribute 11% of their pay each year. The second pension benefit for police officers at West Palm Beach is a drop balance. DROP stands for Deferred Retirement Option Program. When a police officer reaches normal retirement, they have three options. What they could do is, A, they could continue working as a police officer in West Palm Beach, and if they do, they'll accrue a higher pension benefit. Or B, they could terminate employment and start receiving their pension benefit. Or C, they can enter the drop. If the police officer enters the drop, their regular pension benefit is calculated at that time. The regular pension benefit will not be paid to the officer while he or she participates in the drop program. Actually, instead of getting paid that benefit to them, the payments will be accumulated in an account and credited with investment earnings. The earnings will basically range from 4% to 8% depending on how the fund is doing. If the average return since 2011 is less than 8%, the interest crediting rate on the drop drops to 4%. Otherwise, it stays at 8%. Some other features of the drop is that the member agrees to terminate employment with the city at the end of the drop period. So a member, if they make the decision to join the drop program, they must terminate employment within 5 years, because that's the maximum drop period is 5 years. There is no forced distribution of the drop account when a member terminates employment. The third benefit for West Palm Beach police officers is a share plan. The share plan is funded by state money only. The amount of state money contributed to the share plan is based on tax collections on casualty insurance policies inside the city limits of West Palm Beach. The state money was approximately $1.46 million in 2018 for West Palm Beach, and each member received about $5,200 each, roughly. That was the average amount for each member. It's important to note that state money for 2012, 2013, and 2015 was used to fund the pension plan instead of going to the share plan accounts. That's what I was talking about earlier. Slides 6 through 8 review the actual calculations of these three benefits. I don't want to take the time to go through them, but if you ever have a question on that, you could always feel free to give me a call, and I'd be happy to go through it with you. So now let's shift gears and talk about the funding of the pension plan. The major event that took place in July of 2016 was the issuance of the $50 million pension obligation bond. The proceeds of the bond were used to pay off about 90% of the unfunded accrued liability. The unfunded accrued liability is basically that shortfall between the assets in the plan and the liability in the plan. And we took away basically 90% of that shortfall by putting that $50 million into the pension plan. As a result of the pension obligation bond, the funded ratio increased from 82.4% up to 97.1%. The unfunded accrued liability decreased from $56.7 million down to $9.5 million. And the annual amortization payment on the unfunded accrued liability decreased by $6.5 million. So over a 3-year period, the issuance of the pension obligation bond has worked out very well for the city. The city is paying bondholders interest of 3.5% per year, and the earnings on the proceeds of the pension obligation bond, which were put into the pension plan, have earned about 10% per year. So the success in general of a pension obligation bond really depends on timing. The timing has worked out very well for the city right now. The investment return on the $50 million deposited into the pension plan has been roughly, $13 million since July of 2016. The interest that's been paid to the bondholders has been about $5 million, which means that the city is $8 million ahead of the game right now on that strategy to issue the pension obligation bond. As discussed earlier, it's not only the pension obligation bond, it's also the strong investment earnings that the pension plan has seen in recent years. So over the last 7 years, you could see the return that the pension plan has experienced, and the average return is 11.3% over those 7 years listed there. The board has adopted the entry-age normal funding method to determine the required city contribution each year. It's a very common funding method. I'm not going to go into great detail about it, but it's used by 80 to 90% of the plans that I work on. So it's very common, very transparent. Under this funding method, there are two parts of the required city contribution. First part is the employer normal cost. And essentially what that represents is the value of the accruals from the active members each year. It should stay fairly level as a percentage of payroll. The second part of the required city contribution are the amortization payments on the unfunded accrued liability. Changes in the unfunded accrued liability that occur as a result of a plan change or experience gains and losses or assumption changes are not paid for immediately. The plan doesn't experience a loss and the city doesn't have to put all that money in. They get to amortize that over a period of time not to exceed 30 years. So let's look at the level of the two parts of the required city contribution as shown in our last valuation report, our October 1, 2018 report. The column to the right shows the results from our 2017 valuation report, and one column to the left of that is the results from the 2018 valuation report before reflecting any assumption changes. So let's focus on the right two columns, and you'll see that the employer normal cost was 14.63% of pay in 2017, and then 14.61% of pay in 2018. So just what we said before, that the normal cost represents the value of the accruals. It's going to stay pretty level as a percentage of pay unless you're changing something with the plan. The second part of the required city contribution, which is the amortization payments on the unfunded accrued liability, also remained very level as a percentage of payroll. Last year, in 2017, it was 4.72%. This year, in 2018, it was 4.69%. So the required city contribution was 19.35% in the 2017 report and 19.30% of pay in the 2018 report before we reflected any assumption changes.
Yeah, I have a,
2018, 17, 2019.
Sorry, yeah. So let me explain that. I'm talking
Thank
about
you.
the 2000, great question. The 2017 report is represented by the rightmost column. That determines the required city contribution for fiscal year ending 19. So in that report, and then the same for a 2018 report determines the required city contribution for fiscal year ending 20. Sorry about that. That is confusing, but hopefully that clears it up. So the board did approve lowering the investment return assumption by 12.5 basis points, down from 7.75% down to 7.625%. And that's shown in the third column from the right, that change down to 7.625%. And as a result of lowering the investment return assumption, the required city contribution increased from $4.91 million in our, before reflecting any changes, up to $5.44 million. So it was an increase of $530,000 as a result of lowering the investment return assumption. And we'll get to why that decision was made in a short while. The $5.44 million is the final required city contribution if the payments are made quarterly. And again, it's the 2018 valuation report, but it's for fiscal year ending 20, the one that just started last week. So for this fiscal year that we're currently in, the required city contribution is $5.44 million if the payments are made quarterly. If the city chooses to front load that whole contribution and make it as of the beginning of the year, which was last week actually, so October 1, 2019, the contribution would be $5.24 million. All right, so let's review the two components of the required city contribution for fiscal year ending 2020. The normal cost is 15.38% of pay, or $3.91 million. This is often referred to as the operational costs of the pension plan. The annual amortization payments on the unfunded accrued liability is 6.01% of covered payroll, or $1.53 million. The unfunded accrued liability is $19 million as of October 1, 2018. And remember, it was $56.7 million in 2015 before the issuance of the pension obligation bond. So after the unfunded accrued liability is fully paid off, the plan's cost, the required city contribution, will migrate to the employer normal cost, because you're going to pay off the second component of cost. You're only going to be left with the first component. So that will only happen if there are no changes in plan provisions and the actual assumptions are set in such a way that there are gains and losses that cancel each other out over time. The more accurate the actual assumptions are, the more closely they match the actual experience of the plan. That will lead to a higher probability of actual gains and losses offsetting each other, and the cost of this plan will migrate to the normal cost, because you won't have that second part of the contribution. Effective with the 2018 valuation, the board voted to lower the investment return assumption from 7.75 to 7.625%, and the investment return assumption will be lowered again with our 2019 valuation report by 12.5 basis points, down to 7.5%. As a result, we know the required city contribution in our 2019 report will increase by roughly $525,000 to $550,000. So let's just discuss things that we know about the required city contribution in future years. There's a lot we don't know, but at a very high level, the required city contribution is going to be dictated largely by the investments of the plan. If we have some more investment years like we've had for the last 10 years, it's going to be more downward pressure on the required contribution for the city. If we have years like we experienced from 2000 through 2010, it's going to be upward pressure on the city contribution. But that's just at a very high level. There are things that we know for sure. First thing is the required city contribution will increase, as I just said, by about $525,000 to $550,000 next year as a result of lowering that investment return assumption to 7.5%. Due to asset smoothing, there are $13.2 million of unrecognized investment gains. That's good news. We have gains, investment gains, that we didn't recognize. We're smoothing the returns each year, so we have good news to recognize in future years. That'll put some downward pressure on the required city contribution. And to give you a sense, if we just said, well, let's recognize those $13 million of unrecognized gains today, the required city contribution will go down by $1.2 million. So it's good news. We know we have $1.2 million of downward pressure on the required contribution. Now, that's as of our last valuation report, October 1, 2018. Well, we're done with the 2019 year. I don't have the exact return, but the actual return that the plan experienced did not meet the assumption of 7.5%. It was lower. It was probably closer to 2%. So we will have some investment losses, but it's going to offset the unrecognized investment gain position we were in. So, we had this buffer here. That's what it's there for. So when we have a bad year, it wasn't a horrendous year, but we only got a couple percent. We needed to get to 7.5 to meet the assumption. Well, we have a loss, but that's what that $13 million is for. Well, that'll be offset and be lower, but it won't hurt the plan like it would have if we didn't have those gains. So just a couple more slides. Let's talk about the funded ratio. The funded ratio is simply defined as what percentage of the liability is covered by the plan assets. As of October 1, 2018, the funded ratio is 95.1%. Remember, before the pension obligation bond was issued, it was 82%. And to give you a sense, I have about 90 plans on my team, and the average funded ratio for those plans is in the mid to upper 80% range. So the funded ratio for this plan, one measure of the health of a retirement system, is at a very good level. So as discussed last year, the Special Act was amended by increasing the benefit multiplier from 2.68% for each year of service to 3% for each year of service. A 3% benefit multiplier is closer to the average of other public safety plans in Florida. So remember, the employer normal cost represents the value of the annual accruals less member contributions. So comparing the employer normal cost rates of different plans provides just a general sense of the level of benefits provided for West Palm Beach Police versus other neighboring cities' pension plans in Florida. So based on the results shown on this slide, you can see that the employer normal cost for West Palm Beach Police is at the lower end of the range compared to other public safety plans in Florida. Of course, it's not exact. You can't just look at this and say, oh, we're in this place or that place, because they're all using different assumptions, and the assumptions do skew the results somewhat. But in general, I think that the West Palm Beach Police pension benefits are on the lower end compared to other Florida pension plans. So with that being said, I will turn it over to see if there are any questions or issues that you'd like to discuss.
Let me ask a general question.
Sure.
Are there any ticking time bombs of which we should be aware?
Yeah.
Related to that, how many more years is left on the police pension bond? About 26, 20?
That information, it's outside of the pension plan, so I don't have that information. I don't know if anyone else in the room is able to.
Mr. Parks, do you know?
Yeah, Mayor,
You got to talk into the mic.
Mark Park, CFO. We got the bond in 2015. It was a 20-year bond.
All right.
So it's about 15 years left.
Okay. Anyway, but back to the, thank you, Mr. Parks. Back to the general question. Are there any ticking time bombs of which we should be aware?
There's always things to be concerned about with the pension plan. I'm sorry, I mean, I'll tell you right now, if the assumptions play out each year, which we know they won't exactly, but in general, over a 20, 30-year period, if they happen as we're expecting, it's going to be fine. We're going to have, pretty level percentage of pay contributions. Ticking time bomb is we repeat what happened investment-wise, not just for this pension plan, but all pension plans across the country from 2000 through 2009. That's certainly a ticking time bomb because the contribution is going to go way up. So that's that, and it'll make that not the bet, but the strategy of issuing the pension obligation bond. It'll make what looks great now, it'll make it look pretty poor if we revisit a 10-year period of investments like we did from 2000 through 2009 or 10.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Commissioner Nearing.
Thank you, Mayor. Glad this wasn't a Monday morning presentation. Tuesday. So a quick question
Sure.
regarding the pension obligation bond. The unrealized, the 13 million, so we said approximately 5 million
Yeah.
investors and then the 8 million.
Sure.
Is any portion of the unrealized funds obligated to the pension fund, or is that already calculated in our, in other words, how's that being paid back? How are we?
Paying back the pension obligation
Yeah,
bond? It's
exactly.
not outside, it's not coming
General
from the
revenues.
pension plan, it's outside the pension plan.
Gotcha.
So nothing, there'll be no payments from the pension plan to pay the bondholders. I think that's what
Yep.
what you're getting
Yeah.
at. Yeah, it's not coming, it's coming from general assets, I
Gotcha.
assume, or some other
Okay.
city fund.
Okay, thank you.
Madam President.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Sure.
Excuse me. I understand we're at 95.1 of our funded ratio. And you're saying that that's higher than a lot of the others on average that you work with.
Sure.
So is that, that sounds great. I mean,
Yep.
it feels like, we want to be at 100% or we want to be getting there. I was just curious as to the details of that as far as recruiting and retaining our police officers. Is that something that they look at? Is that something that's touted? Is it something that just is helpful to the CFO and the policymakers?
Yeah,
Or
yeah,
to-
no, great question. I don't think the 95% funded ratio is looked on as a recruiting tool or anything like that. It's, you want to have that elevated. If there's a plan that's 50% funded, and believe me, there are plans that have a 50% funded ratio, an officer may, not want to work for a city that's in that sort of situation. Here, I don't know how much of an attraction it has, but it's certainly a very good place to be in. In terms of attraction and retention of police officers, to me, it's more of a benefit level issue. What are the benefits being offered? And, if they could get slightly higher or lower in a neighboring city, that's going to be the appeal or the drawback of a particular city.
Great.
Did that answer your
Yeah,
question?
yeah.
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
And I have to say, I guess I've been on the dais longer than anyone else in here, but when I first came on, before we issued the pension obligation bond, that was a very major issue nationally. I mean, there are municipalities that were on the verge of bankruptcy because they could not meet the actuarial number. So to see where we are over the 90% threshold is a tremendous testament to Mr. Parks and his team and the prior leadership of the city to position us. I think all we have to do is make sure that the pension fund recovers more than 3%, right? I mean,
3.5, I think it is.
Three and
but
a
yeah,
half.
yeah.
We've been fortunate, but if return, I guess we only made 1% to 2% this year. So
Right.
hopefully that's not the canary in the coal mine, meaning that we're in a downward fashion. But we've had some good years, and that $13 million is certainly a nice of unrealized income is a nice cushion to have. But the value of what the pension obligation bond did for our city as compared to other municipalities, not only the state but around the nation, really put us in very good stead.
I agree, yep.
Any other questions? Very fine report, very good news. How often do you get back to us to report? Once every 6 months?
I think it's every year, because we
Okay.
do our evaluation reports every year, so usually we wait after we present that report. And believe me, when I tell you, we go through this report very thoroughly with the board. You have a great board of trustees that ask great questions about this, and they make decisions based on this, in terms of investments, and they have a lot of professionals to help them with that. So it's a very, and then, my role here is really just to summarize it. I don't want to, again, take the 2 hours that I joked about earlier. But I do with the pension board.
That was a joke, yeah. Any other, Jack, you're on the board, right? Any other members of the board here today?
No,
Okay, well,
just, Jack Frost, and I have the honor of being the chair of the fund, but we have some very, very good board members. We have the 2 elected police officers, Captain Joe Ahern and also Captain Troy Marchese. The mayor's other appointee is Craig Colley, who's a CPA who's been in town for a long time. And then our 5th member is Dana Fergakis, who's a trust attorney.
well, thank you all for your service. This is great news.
It's our pleasure. And also on the plus side is by lowering the assumption rate over time, that it gives us easier hurdle to beat, which particularly when we see what's happened this past year, that we're in a better position to deal with it.
Okay, very good. Thank you all very much, and thank you for the report.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
Okay.